At this point, Riot really needs to call Mario to take a look at the company, because it's leak after leak, and this one was a big one. As everyone already knows, we're not getting more than one new champion this year, which pushed the expectations and hype for Locke even higher, and apparently the release should happen somewhere between June and July. So we're also getting a third season, which will bring another champion rework, and yes, that rework was confirmed by Medler himself. I even mentioned in my last video that it's very likely to be Amumu with a season set in Shurima, but there's also a chance to do an entire season focused on the project line. Although it's kind of weird to imagine a champion rework being developed and released for a full season that's centered around a skin universe. Either way, according to Big Bad Bear, who's a pretty reliable leaker, the first champion of 2027 will be a girl who has elemental powers, but she doesn't really control them very well. We still don't have much more information, but this whole idea of not being able to control your powers properly isn't exactly new from a narrative standpoint, since other champions also play with that concept, but bringing that into mechanics and gameplay, that's a whole different story. So it would actually be pretty cool to see that lack of control triggering some kind of elemental reaction or effect, like, I don't know, Elsa from Frozen or something. Another thing that came to mind when thinking about this whole cause and effect idea is Minerva, the Witch of Wrath from Ray Zero. With the authority of Wrath, she can heal any physical wound by touching someone, and normally she does that by punching them, but that ends up draining mana directly from the soul of the world, and as a consequence, somewhere else on the planet, severe natural disasters start happening, killing thousands of people in the process. So it would be interesting if she tried to use the earth element for an ability, and the consequence of that was causing an earthquake around her, or maybe wind creates a hurricane, things like that. And honestly, it's very likely that when this character releases, it will be together with League next. In that case, it's almost certain that Riot would want to introduce some kind of new mechanic with that character, considering we'll supposedly have a new engine. The possibilities of doing something really surprising, something that wasn't possible before because of technical limitations, are pretty big. A lot of champions in their past either couldn't be made or had to be heavily reworked because of those limitations. But even with the current spaghetti code, Riot managed to make Vex's shadow work very well. So even if the Elemental Girl doesn't arrive with League next, there's still a good chance we'll see something pretty incredible with her. Maybe we could even end up with something really cool that's close to the scrapped ultimate of Azir, back when he was called Seth the Sand Mage. He had a passive where he would spread sand across the map, and then with his ult, he could form giant hands of sand that would grab enemies and smash them into each other, using the sand he had already spread around the map. There's also a possibility that Riot could take inspiration from the original planned kit for Aurelian's Soul, back when he was still Aushin. At the time, Aushin would have had the ability to create a cloud that would rain good fortune on his allies. I'm guessing that good fortune would translate into something like constant healing, increased mana regeneration, while the rain cloud stayed over them. But for enemies, Aushin could summon a thunderstorm, most likely dealing damage. Even though we barely have any information about it yet, people are already criticizing this elemental girl. A lot of people are betting she'll be that kind of fearful, insecure preteen character who doesn't know her place in the world and all that, the typical cliche. Kiana is completely egocentric, narcissistic, and vain, hungry for power and greatness, wanting everyone to bow and worship her, aiming to become something greater than the Yuntal caste. Milio, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of that. He's kind, affectionate, a bit goofy, gentle, hopeful, always trying to help everyone and prove his worth so he can reintegrate his family into Ishukan, making them proud, especially his grandmother. So we already have two pretty extreme poles. I wonder if the elemental girl will land somewhere in the middle, or if Riot will go for something entirely new. And honestly, my criticism, or in this case my exception, is that Riot gives new elements to the character instead of just copying the one Kiana already uses, which are the axioms of water, magma, and nature. Milio represents the axiom of fire, but in his case he uses a new application of it. Let's say it's like a sub-bending of the element, kind of like an Avatar where fire had lightning and combustion as a sub-bending, earth had metal and magma, water had blood, and so on. Milio's version would basically be like a form of fire that heals. Honestly, it wouldn't be bad if they went that direction either. Now, as for her appearance, you can probably expect the character to have darker skin and features that resemble people from Latin America. To me, her appearance will probably be something like Storm from X-Men, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Riot took a look at our gameplay kit in Marvel Rivals. Before we keep going, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member. You'll get access to some really cool perks like picking video topics or getting early access to videos. I even checked it out, and if you translated it into the context of League, Storm would probably be a mage as her main role, with strong damage especially when hitting the enemy team together, but with passive abilities that buff nearby allies, giving her a secondary function as an enchanter support. So trying to predict the lane for the elemental girl, I'd bet she's going to be a mid lane mage, but because of how her kit might work, a lot of people will probably end up playing her as support, kind of like Lux. Support mains can keep crying though, because no, you're not getting a new support champion anytime soon. And since we're talking about elements, we also have to talk about Ixtal, which was Riot's biggest promise when it comes to the narrative, bringing a whole geographic expansion to Runeterra. On top of that, there was this whole idea that Ixtal was going to be the birthplace of several other civilizations, giving rise to the people of Hylia on the Blessed Isles, the Buru from Bilgewater, and even the priests of Targon. They also played a major role in the creation of the First Ascended. If I had to explain Ixtal to someone who doesn't really know anything about Runeterra lore, I'd say that it's a mix of the Road of El Dorado from DreamWorks and Atlantis, the Lost Empire from Disney, either before or after the city sank into the ocean. But you'd also throw in Wakanda and Talokan from the MCU into that mix. If Ixtal really ends up being the first season of 2027, I hope that the arcane retcons help Riot start fixing all the plot holes the region currently has, especially the ones that heavily contradict the current lore of Skarner. Because after the fall of the Acacia Rebellion, the war against the Void, the fall of Azir, and the Darken War, Ixtal regained full independence and was no longer affiliated with the Empire of Shurima. And no, Ixtal wasn't conquered by force by Shurima. The Yuntal chose to align themselves with the Empire in the past, and like I mentioned before, they had direct involvement in the creation of the First Ascended, most likely providing the technology used to create the Sun Disk. Of course, together with Targon, which orchestrated that whole scheme under the Order of the Aspects, tricking Aurelian's soul with the crown to basically hack his mind and figure out how the ascension process works, while also controlling him and using him as a source of magic to enable their plan of building an army of synthetic celestials, which in this case are god warriors of Shurima. You can even use this Ixtal concept art as proof, where we can see structures from what looks like a pyramid-shaped archaeology, plus some kind of tower on the right side, and also several entrances and portal-like passages. And if you look closely, a lot of things from this image also appear in the artworks I showed earlier when talked about the Buru, Hylia, and Targon. It's almost like a cultural legacy from Ixtal that ended up surviving among other peoples. And for those who don't know, an archaeology is basically a mix of words, architecture, and ecology. It's an urban design concept for hyperdense, self-sustaining, mixed-use structures, designed to minimize environmental impact by integrating housing, work, and leisure into a single massive building or compact complex. The whole point of an archaeology is to reduce the need for transportation, pollution, and resource waste, functioning almost like a living integrated ecosystem. The largest archaeology in Ixtal, and also its heart and capital, is Ishokan. So yeah, the people of Ixtal clearly have a very high level of knowledge when it comes to engineering, elemental magic, and other kinds of resources that made constructions like this possible. Don't think they're barbarians or technologically less advanced just because they live inside a jungle far away from the rest of the world. Their real problem is exactly that mindset of not wanting to deal with foreigners, letting the jungle handle them, and refusing to confront them directly. And that's something Kiana, by the way, sees as completely unacceptable and a clear sign of weakness. To give you an idea, Ixtal doesn't even have a standing army, despite all its power. The closest thing to that is the Guardians of the Path to Ishokan, who basically act as watchers, constantly patrolling the lines of power between the archaeologies. But either way, Skarner has taken even more responsibility as the protector of Ixtal, staying down there in an underground chamber where he can feel every vibration coming from Ishokan and other places. At this point, he's basically become some kind of security system for all of Ixtal, although now he acts more like some kind of overprotective crazy mom or even a stalker, and he'll stop, even by force if necessary, any attempt by the new generations of Ixtal to push the nation toward reconnecting with the outside world. It's not for nothing that he even has a voice line making it clear he knows about a certain conspiratorial coup attempt.
Kiana, daughter of the Yoon, I know what mutiny you plot in the shadows.
But in the lore of Ixtal itself, it's already been revealed that over the years, other regions have tried to launch expeditions towards its borders, and in most cases, it ended in total failure. Not even Noxians managed to succeed. There's a suspense short story with some horror elements called At the Edge of the World, which shows exactly that, an expedition reaching one of the borders of Ixtal, and man, everything that happens there is just insane. Besides Noxus, it's also said that Bilgewater has attempted expeditions before, and more recently, the Explorers Guild from Piltover. And Piltover has actually been more successful than Noxus and Bilgewater, since they currently have a mining team operating in the forests of Ixtal. In the short story Fit to Rule, the mayor of the village of Tigris dies while trying to stop a tractor from clearing trees so the wood could be taken and used as fuel to power mining operations. So even though he died, the mayor did manage to stop that tractor. And man, just so you understand how crazy this is, the position of a mayor in a village or settlement in Ixtal is usually given to a Ixtal, who are elemental masters from the highest and most important caste within the government of Ixtal. If he really was a Ixtal and still died trying to stop a tractor and some miners, that's just absurd. Unless those miners had Hextech firearms or something like that. In that case, yeah, it becomes a lot more understandable. But how did those Piltovian miners even find that village in the first place? Simple, Kiana got pissed. Because by law, the title of mayor was given to her sister after the previous mayor died. And even though Kiana wanted the position, she couldn't claim it because she was the youngest daughter. The only way would be for Mara to step down and give the position to Kiana, but she refuses. Even after Kiana argues and proves that she's far stronger and more capable of protecting the place. So Kiana, being the complete asshole she is, deliberately leaves the secret path to the village open by not sealing it with elemental magic that's normally used when entering or leaving the place. The next day, a massacre happens. Kiana, now back in Ishokan, wakes up and finds her sister crying and completely desperate, saying the village had been discovered and that half of the people from that settlement were killed in a massacre carried out by the miners, while the other half had to hide just to survive, and Mara herself barely escaped with her life. In the end, she admits that Kiana was better, that she was right, and passes the title of Mayor of Tikris to her. Now, here's the thing I keep asking myself. How is Skarner allowing all of this to happen? First of all, he's the protector of Ixtal, and can detect intruders and things like that. There shouldn't even be mining happening in the forest to begin with. Inside that underground chamber that basically works like a massive detection and listening system covering all of Ixtal, he should absolutely be capable of using his powerful control over the earth element. With that alone, he could deal with that group of miners easily. Sure, that short story was released long before his rework and the narrative overhaul of the Bracken race, but even so, the story is still considered canon for now. So what is Skarner doing? Is he now acting like some kind of crazy overprotected mom who stalks her own children 24 hours a day, trying to protect them from everything and everyone, even from themselves if they try to disobey his orders, just waiting for the Ixtal to deal with this threat? Because honestly, that makes no sense. Because the only one who has actually shown overwhelming power so far, easily defeating the outsiders with their machines without much effort, was Kiana, her sister, who also passed the Vitalion test at a young age and is considered talented, even if not as much as the youngest one, just got completely wrecked fighting those miners. And man, it doesn't make sense to me how an elemental master loses a fight on her own terrain. Sure, the miners probably had weapons to deal with wild animals or things like that, but still, Mara, who's native to Ixtal and part of the elite, ended up being inferior to a group of miners, which means that the group led by Caitlyn and Arcane, the one that hunted Jinx through Zaun, would have caused more destruction if they had been there in the forest. It's just bizarre. The level of complacency shown by the people of Ixtal, even among the elite, was absurd at that point, and it really shouldn't be like that. Regular people, sure, you can kind of understand it, but Mara and her servants, who are skilled elemental mages, that's just embarrassing. And since we're talking about Piltover, it's worth mentioning that in the Arcane universe, the Anomaly and almost everyone who was touched by it, except for Warwick and Oriana, who are special cases, ended up disappearing somewhere along with Victor and Jace, probably another dimension or some other kind of plane of existence. And it's already been confirmed that even though the anomaly generated by the use of Hextech is gone, the inventions that rely on Hextech are still functioning normally in Piltover, and well, they still depend on those Hextech crystals and gems to work, but it's almost certain that the new Council of Piltover would either ban or heavily regulate the use of Hextech. And that's a tough situation, because its invention basically became the biggest economic pillar of the entire city. Could Hextech still be exploited? Yeah, I believe so, especially illegally. There will always be some rich scumbag trying to profit from it, even if it ends up screwing over other people, the environment, or even the entire world they live in. And Riot, which already introduced the idea of Ixtal versus Piltover, could easily take advantage of this setup from Arcane, where the clans and families from Piltover might start looking for other resource sources through exploration and research, eventually discovering something valuable in Ixtal worth investing in. It would basically be like that situation in the MCU where other countries try to infiltrate Wakanda to gain access to vibranium. Actually, there are two main reasons why Ixtal might be chosen for 2027. The first is that it's the most neglected region and one of the most demanded by the community. A lot was promised about it, but very little was actually explored. And what we do have still isn't enough. On top of that, the lore around it is full of inconsistencies. The second reason is that Avatar is making a huge comeback. We're getting a new animated movie focused on Aang and the team during their older years. And despite the delays and Paramount changing plans so the movie wouldn't release in theaters anymore, the film is expected to arrive on October 9th, 2026 on Paramount+. One of the co-creators of the series even posted on Instagram saying the movie is finished and that it's amazing. He said he can't wait to share it with everyone and told his fans to stay tuned, which probably means a trailer will drop sometime in the next few months. And of course, we also have that one, considered one of the best live-action adaptations ever made, the Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action series, which already has a trailer showing Toph, one of the most beloved characters among Avatar fans, and it's already debuted, generating a lot of hype. There's also going to be a new animated series set after The Legend of Korra called Avatar: Seven Havens, showing a post-apocalyptic world after a massive cataclysmic event that reshaped the planet. On top of that, now there will be two avatars, the twins Pavi and Nisha. Man, Riot knows that Avatar has one of the biggest communities and fandoms in the world. Of course they're going to try to ride that wave of elemental themes. But that's basically it. I'll see you guys in the next video.